Welcome back to a very chilly Fuel Up Classic. Now the plan was to bring you a video on that lovely little Morgan that you can see behind me, but unfortunately today it's minus temperatures, there's loads of salt on the road and it just wouldn't be the right kind of conditions to go and test that car. So that's going to have to wait for another day. But I thought whilst we're all set up, why not give you a little bit of an update on my very cheap £800 Land Rover Freelander that I've now owned for just over 6 months. I've covered about 9,000 miles in that time, and I thought this is the perfect opportunity to tell you how much it's cost, what's gone wrong, and also how I feel 6 months on from, in my first video on this car, I called it the worst Land Rover ever made. Well, the Morgan might have to wait for another day, but if you do love classics of all different types and varieties, then please do subscribe if you haven't already. But let's crack on with a little Freelander update for now. So a very quick recap. Middle of last year, I was driving around in a Toyota Hilux pickup truck. It did everything you would expect of a Toyota. But to be honest with you, I never really gelled with it. It was kind of unnecessary for my needs at the time, and it was still worth quite a lot of money. That also overlapped with me living with an MGB GT V8, a car that I knew would probably come up for sale quite soon after filming, and I really wanted to own it. So I did some maths, the Hilux went, the MGB GT V8 joined my classic car lineup. But obviously that left a big void for everyday normal transport. As much as I'd love to put the Labradors in the back of the V8, it's not really suitable for it. So I went on a bit of a hunt to buy a car very quickly. Often the worst way to do things. This was local, it was incredibly cheap at just £800, and we took a gamble on it. Now, let me just explain to you in this video what's gone wrong in that time. Buying any sub £1,000 car is always going to be a gamble, let alone a near 20-year-old Land Rover. But you can tell me at the end whether you think my bargain Freelander has actually turned out to be a great little buy. So the bonnet up on a Land Rover is a familiar sight to many, and I have had a couple of these moments throughout my ownership with this car. Unfortunately, some of them at the side of the road, but I will say it's not left me completely stranded yet, and I haven't come home on a tow truck. And actually, I've owned, this is number 14 for Land Rovers that I've owned over the years of all various different types and models and years. And somewhat controversially, despite what the internet will tell you and the people down the pub that have never owned one, a Land Rover has never failed to get me home. They've always been reasonably reliable, and I've actually found them over 14 different examples now to be no less reliable than anything else. That's just my opinion and my experience. Others may differ, but let's get on to the cheap Freelander, because it's not been entirely faultless, as you may expect. But everything that's been done on this car has been DIY, done by me, whether at home on the driveway or on the side of the road to get me home. Thankfully, that's only been once. But let's talk about that breakdown first, because I had a split turbo hose one morning on the way to work, plumes of black smoke coming out the exhaust, down on power, and I thought, hold on, we've either lost a turbo here or hopefully it's just a pipe. Thankfully, it was the latter. So ordered a new set of pipes for it, managed to take that one up, limp it home, eBay, next day delivery, not a lot of money, I'll get onto the cost in a moment, fitted a new set of pipes in under an hour, and we were back on the road again. So can we call it a proper breakdown? I'm not so sure. Let's not forget, this is nearly 20 years old now, 136,000 miles on the clock. I think we can forgive it for a split turbo hose, can't we? But there have been a couple of other niggly faults. 2 window regulators have failed over the last 6 months. I hate doing them as a job, but actually on the Freelander, they're not too bad. And again, eBay, cheap and cheerful for the parts. They've held up since, so no real damage done apart from losing my Saturdays and Sundays fitting new ones. And on top of that, the sunroof has stopped working, and I'm now in that precarious position where you don't really want to press the button and open it for fear that it's not going to close again. It was making some funny noises the last time I used it, so I've condemned it for the time being. Very occasionally, it just fails to start on the first turn of the key. I can leave this car for days on end in all kinds of temperatures and it fires up first turn of the key. But weirdly, after I've driven the car for an hour or so, returned to it after a couple of hours, it can occasionally really struggle to start. I think it might be a fueling issue, perhaps the injectors are a little bit worn, or perhaps it's even an immobiliser fault. To be perfectly honest with you, I haven't dived into it. I refuse to pay a garage to work on this car. It's just not worth it. And the total cost, including an MOT, which is our annual inspection here in the UK, which this car has to have, and an oil change I had at the same time. Thought I'd treat it because I had no record of when the last one was done. Come to a total of £285. Now, over 6 months and 9,000 miles, that equates to just 3 pence a mile. This is incredibly cheap motoring. I'm not actually sure it can get much cheaper than this, but there is one bugbear I have with this car, and that's the performance, or really it's the lack of performance. The TD4 diesel engine in this, well, it was never really a powerhouse, but coupled with an automatic gearbox and obviously the years and the miles that this car has done, it is really rather slow to get up to motorway speeds. Once you're up there, it cruises along quite nicely, but let me just show you a clip. This is a slip road that I take every day, very short. You have to get up to speed rather quickly to join a 70-mile-an-hour road, and I find that this car really struggles with that. It's painfully slow at times. I hope it will all become a little bit clearer when I show you. This is a 70-mile-an-hour road with a very short slipway that I do every morning in this car, and I find I have to put it into sport mode, which is almost laughable. And let's just, you know, we're not foot to the floor, but near enough. And I'll just show you how slowly. And bear in mind, you've got cars coming up behind you at 70 plus miles an hour. That's 50. 55, 60, which is just about where you start to feel safe. I'm obviously not expecting this to be a performance car, but it is woefully slow. I'm sure that auto box saps a lot of the power. So with all that in mind, I've really got to think about what the future of this car holds with me, because I bought it as a dog car, a general workhorse, and for that it's excelled pretty much in every area. But I am using it a lot more than I first expected. And as I may have mentioned before in the last video, this particular model, because it's a late 2006 diesel automatic, sits in one of the highest tax bands here in the UK. That means it costs me about £750 a year just to tax the car. Now, for that kind of money, I could be running around in an L322 Range Rover, which was the car that I originally set out to buy and seems to be very much the car of the month at the moment with content creators. I don't know about you, but everyone seems to be buying old L322 Range Rovers, and I'd quite like to scratch that itch as well. As I mentioned, I've had loads of Land Rovers, but never that particular model of Range Rover. And perhaps a 5-litre supercharged one would make a lovely daily driver for a little while. But anyway, back to reality for a minute. The Freelander. I am just about to go and lend this car to my mum, who, if you do watch the channel quite a lot, has been driving around in another cheap car that I bought for the channel, the £500 Jaguar XJ. We managed to save that car. We got it back on the road. And then actually I lent it to my mum and she didn't want to give it back. But that car is about to go off and have a little bit of money spent on it, and I will give you an update because it's been missing from the channel for a little while. But basically I'm having a full suspension rebush done on it and a bit of a refresh overall. And truthfully, I'd rather spend my money on that Jag than this Freelander. So Once again, the Freelander is doing support car duties, and she will now use this for the next few months whilst the XJ is off having its work done. And then I think after that, well, maybe it will be time to move it on. Maybe I should do some kind of trick with it before it goes. I've got a roof tent sat in my shed at home that I've only ever used once, and I do sometimes look at this and go, well, we could put it on the top and head off somewhere, go somewhere silly with it. Maybe try and see if that all-wheel drive capability, which, as people always tell me, I've not really tried it with one of these, they're pretty capable things in the mud, these old Freelanders. I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but at the moment, whilst it's minus temperatures, there's plenty of salt on the road, the classics are going to be tucked away, and this car will still be used in all weathers, for all things, and I'm sure still putting in good service.